Boyce Watkins.
Thank you, brother. And I'm sorry, man. I didn't mean to disrupt his job. The poor students who went to dinner with me, they kind of learned that once I get started, I kind of just keep going, and I apologize for that. All right. So first of all, I want to say thank you for inviting me. It is an honor to address you and to be here with you. I also enjoyed talking to you individually before we got started. It's really, I'm here to learn. One of the things that I've learned over time is that to be a good teacher, you got to learn how to be a good student. And so when I'm listening to you, I'm not just pretending, I'm really listening, I'm really learning. And I think that being a lifelong learner is something that you may want to do, especially for those of you who are still students. I encourage you to learn. You stop growing once you start thinking you're the smartest person in the room all the time. And I would say that, even people on the street that don't have any education that you have or all the letters behind their name, you can learn something from everybody. So always be a learner. Never become a full-time teacher and a full-time know-it-all. And that just kind of makes you an asshole. All right, so with that being said, I also have to give special thanks to my new best friends, Dominique and Destiny and Amber and my sister that I met with the awesome afro, Ariel and Ryan, and who else? Did I miss anybody? I don't know if I missed anybody, but if I did, I apologize. I enjoyed talking to you guys earlier. It was real cool. Destiny walked up and I said, "Hey, my name is Boyce. What's your name?" She said, "Destiny." I said, "Disney?" And she said, "Destiny." So she had that country accent, and I thought that was great. So I might start just calling her Disney, just because you got Ariel and Disney. I think that works, right? Anyway, the first thing I'll start with is to let you know, number one, once we're done, we can do Q&A, and I want to make sure that the conversation fits what you guys want to talk about, not just what I want to talk about. But then number two, I want to give you a little bit of background, a little bit of perspective so that you know something about the person that is talking to you now. Commentary means it means a whole lot more when you understand the context and the character and the background of the commentator, the person who's saying the things that they're saying to you. Because one thing I do believe, I really believe this, and I believe this is what causes so much division in the world, is that there's rarely such a thing as a universal truth. There's rarely such a thing as one truth that fits all. Most of the time, the truth comes from a perspective. And it's like looking at a building. If you're looking at the building from the back and I'm looking at it from the front and somebody else is looking at it from the top, we're all going to see different things. And if we think that our perspective is the only perspective that matters, then we're going to end up having a fight that really doesn't amount to anything. Maybe a better approach would be for me to figure out why you see the building the way you see it, and maybe I can try to see it through your eyes and we understand each other. We don't have to agree. I think that the ability to agree to disagree will save you a lot of fights, especially when you get married, right? Sometimes you got to just agree to disagree. Don't keep fighting because it's going to destroy your marriage, right? The same thing is true with friendships. Same thing is true with political alliances, everything. Sometimes you just have to agree to disagree and leave it at that. I know that as a black man, there are things I'm going to say to you sometimes that you're not going to get, that aren't going to make any sense to you. But you're not going to tell me that it's not my truth, because I saw my life. I saw my experience. I've seen the things that I've read and the things that I know about black history and all these other things. And you're not going to tell me that that's crazy or that that's wrong. But you might tell me that you have another point of view, and I want to respect that too. So to give you the background, my mother was a baby when she gave birth to me. She was so young. I think my mother and I went to elementary school together. And I think that when I was in the third grade, she was in the first. Anyway, my mother was a young, 16-year-old single mom, and my father wasn't, he didn't stick around, but he was a baby. He was about 15 years old himself, just too young to be having sex. And so, through school, my mother got remarried when I was about 3. And so when I talk about my father, I'm talking about the man who raised me. I'm not so much talking about the sperm donor. I don't know enough about the man one way or the other to like him or dislike him. They say the opposite of love isn't hate. The opposite of love is indifference. And I'm truly indifferent. There's really not any, I don't even know him well enough to even be mad at him. And so, but I was fortunate. I was raised by a really good man that I respect immensely. And it's funny because, he's a conservative guy. I'm not conservative. I'm probably more on the liberal spectrum, but my father was a cop. He was a Vietnam vet. He was very much into, the concepts like personal responsibility. Like if you want something, you just do it. One time I was talking to him about losing weight, and I was like, yeah, I want to lose weight, and I've been reading about these different diets and reading the labels, and I know that if I eat fewer carbs, this will happen. If I eat more vegetables, that'll happen. Blah 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 blah. And he was just like, if you want to lose weight, just take your fat ass to the gym and quit going to McDonald's, right? And that's the kind of thinking that he has. He's very basic, very no nonsense. Like, just do it. When he wanted to quit smoking cigarettes, he just stopped. When I ask him, I say, well, how did you stay married for 43 years? He says, because I didn't get a divorce. I just, and that's it. Like, just very basic stuff. And that's the thing. A lot of times the things that we make complicated are actually very basic. And the other thing too is that with the respect I have for my parents, they think that half of what I do is a little bit crazy. They don't agree with a lot of what I say about race and racism, but I listen to them. But every time I go home, it's so funny. Every time I go home, Fox News is on TV. I strongly suspect they voted for Trump. I tell them, I say, y'all about the only two black people on earth that voted for Donald Trump, right? But I listen to them, out of respect in the sense that I want to hear what led you to think that way, because I know they're not alone. They're not, they weren't the only black people to do what they did. They're not the only black people to believe what they believe, and they're not crazy because they believe it. And I think that's where we got to get away from this whole idea that if you disagree with me, you're an idiot. We dehumanize each other, and dehumanization is actually the first step toward things like the Nazi Holocaust. First thing they did when they wanted to go slaughter all the Jews was they dehumanized them. They made them like they were roaches or rodents or less than human. And then when you think of somebody as less than human, you don't care what happens to them. That's what's happened to black people. For hundreds of years, you've been told, or doctrine, there have been laws put in place saying black people are 3/5 of a human being. And that's why a person, say in 1912, a really good church-going white person could literally take their child to a picnic in the park with the sun shining and take a smiling picture in front of a black man whose body has been burned alive with his testicles cut off and he's hanging from a tree. And they're thinking that they're still good people. Because in their mind, they didn't actually kill a human being. They just killed something that was subhuman. Almost like at a pig roast. You might see people when they're having a pig roast and they got, everybody smiling and having fun and drinking, and the pig is like on the stick, like just, burned up with the apple in his mouth. And nobody's really feeling bad for the pig, right? Like, well, why would we feel bad for a pig? Well, that's kind of how black people have always been seen. And so if you want to look at white supremacy at its core, if you really want to understand white supremacy, how it works in America, you really got to go back and look at history. In fact, one of the reasons white supremacy works so well in America is because history isn't taught. Again, that's one of the artifacts of white supremacy, right? White people haven't done anything wrong, and if they did do something wrong, it was something small, and we've made up for it, and everything's fine, and let's hold hands and sing "We Shall Overcome," and it's all going to go away. But if you read books like Black Labor, White Wealth by Dr. Claude Anderson, Black Labor, White Wealth, that's the name of the book. He breaks down the history of America going back 500 years to when the first slaves were brought on the shore, and shows you specific laws and doctrine that were put in place, institutional mechanisms designed to basically remind the world of one basic, very simple idea. Whites are superior, blacks are inferior. So much of what you see today is a direct artifact of hundreds of years of social, political, and economic conditioning in America that led us to where we are today. So when I talk about white supremacy, here's what happens. When I talk about white supremacy, a lot of white people get pissed off at me. Either white people get mad and some black people get mad because they really think if you stop talking about it, it'll go away. And they don't understand. I'm not blaming you. I'm not looking at you and saying you're the reason that things are like this. I'm saying that this is a system that was put in place. You look at the history of this campus. I mean, my God, go back and if you want to read a horror story, read stories about the way black people were treated on this campus in the 1950s. Right? That right there will tell you a whole lot about this country and the institution or the foundation upon which this whole institution was established. Right? So anyway, moving on. So when I got, when I went through school, I didn't do very well. I was kind of told that I was not as smart as the other kids and that I should be on medication and all this other stuff. And that's what they do to black boys. Black boys are 5 times more likely to be put on psychiatric medication than white kids. It's a nationwide phenomenon. It's what has been a consistent, ongoing effort for hundreds of years to keep black males uncompetitive. Now, if you look at the way slavery was described and the treatment of black people was described 200 years ago, you will see words like uncompetitive. Like we want African Americans, we want black people to be, or the Negroes to be more specific. We want the Negroes to be a reliable, well-trained, well-disciplined workforce, but we want them to be uncompetitive with white people. So basically there's still mechanisms in place to keep black people, especially black men, incredibly uncompetitive and keep putting black boys on psychiatric medications one way that's done. And so they wanted to put me on medication. My mother said, hell no, thank God. And but I stumbled through school. Like a lot of black boys, I thought I was an athlete. I thought I was supposed to play a sport or something. I didn't know how to identify myself as anything other than an athlete. I certainly wasn't a scholar. I certainly wasn't smart. And unfortunately, I wasn't that good at sports. I was okay. I wasn't bad. I was like captain of my track team, and I was on the football team and all that. But, I wasn't good enough to play sports at the college level or whatever. And I'm so glad I wasn't because I know a lot of guys who've gone to the NFL and stuff like that. And some of them actually committed suicide. Some of them are so depressed that they can't get out of bed in the morning. Some of them have brain damage, and many of them are broke. But I went to I got to about the age of 18. And at 18, I met my first girlfriend. And we started doing this thing called sex, and we liked it. And we found out that there's another consequence of sex called pregnancy. And so here she was. I was 18 years old. I had this baby on the way. And I was like, oh my God, how did I end up in this position, right? So I'm scared to death. And I remember I met her at Taco Bell, and we both had this job at Taco Bell. I stay away from tacos. Tacos will just get you in trouble every time. And so I was sitting there thinking, what am I going to do with my life? I have this baby coming, and I don't really know how I'm going to pay for this. And I wasn't really college material, and I didn't want to go in the military because I didn't want to get shot. And I didn't want to, I didn't want to be pimped. I didn't want anybody telling me what to do. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to go to college. And I went to college just like that. That's why I went to college. And so I got there, and they were like, well, what do you want to major in? And I was like, well, what is finance? They said, well, finance is money. I said, okay, I'll major in that because I didn't have any money. So I figured if I studied money and learned about money, I figured if I studied money and I learned about money, somebody would pay me money to talk about money. And so I studied finance, and I didn't know how to really study because I'd never really done it before, right? But I referenced what I knew. I knew sports. And I knew that in sports, there were a few things that were always true. I knew that if you want to win a championship, you have to practice consistently. You have to practice every day. You can't practice once a week or once a month. You have to practice every day. I also knew that you had to start well in advance. Like you can't expect to win the state championship in football if you start practicing the day before the game. You're practicing 8 months in advance, right? I also knew that if you want to win, you got to work harder than the next guy. So when I was, thinking about studying, I treated it like sports, and I called it practice because that made it more interesting to me because school actually kind of bored me. I didn't really see what education can do for me. And so people say, you going to the library to study? I'd be like, nah, man, I'm going to practice. And that was my little joke. And I was trying to figure out how many hours a day should I study. And I didn't know. I really didn't know. I didn't know college students don't study that much, right? A lot of college students don't. So I was like, well, I work at Taco Bell, and when they need me to work 9 or 10 hours a day, I can do that. So I can study 5 hours a day. That's easy. I only have to stand up all day, right? And I didn't realize that most college students don't study 5 hours a day, right? And it's so interesting to me because, think about that. Go to your friends and say, Dr. Watkins says you should study 5 to 6 hours a day while you're in school. What are your friends going to say? They're going to be like, hell to the no, right? They're going to be like, oh, Lord, that's too much. That's too serious. Oh, my God, right? But here's the funny thing. Here's the thing that always boggled my mind is that same person who says they won't study 4 or 5 or 6 hours a day, they'll go get a minimum wage job at McDonald's or Burger King and work 8 or 9 hours a day on that job, right? And that minimum wage paycheck's going to last you a week, but your education will last you for the rest of your life. So you'll put more energy and more time into building somebody else's dream than you'll put into building your own dream. That's a slave mentality. If you only know how to work hard because somebody's making you work hard, then that means you're fit for slavery. You're built for slavery. Why would you not work as hard for yourself as you would for other people? If you're going to be lazy all the time. At least be consistent, right? And so that was my thinking, like, well, why would I work harder at McDonald's or at Burger King or Taco Bell than I would with my own education? So I didn't just study 4 or 5 hours a day. Sometimes I study 7 or 8 hours a day. And people thought I was crazy because I'd study till 2 in the morning on Saturday night or whatever. I still went to the parties. I still did everything else. But I treated it like a full-time job. And what happened was, for the first time, school became very easy. I made straight A's. It wasn't hard. I had triple major and got 2 bachelor's degrees all in 4 years while working a full-time job, all of that, right? And it wasn't hard because I took my future seriously, right? And so what I would just say to you is that, and this goes really to the first thing I want to touch on, because one of the things we wanted to hit on was 5 things I think Dr. King would say if he were here is you got to understand that blackness means excellence. Stop believing that blackness means mediocrity. You're not mediocre people. You come from the greatest civilization, greatest groups of people in the history of the world. You are the descendants of the survivors of the Middle Passage. Do you know how horrible the Middle Passage was? The Middle Passage, you know how many millions of people died in the Middle Passage? I mean, you've probably been well-versed on the Nazi Holocaust in World War II, but you aren't very well-versed in your Holocaust that has occurred repeatedly over the last 400 years. You're not well-versed on how many millions of your people have died along the way in this thing called America, right? So, at the end of the day, you have something in you that makes you extraordinary, and sometimes you throw that away and you make yourself mediocre. Now, why do you do that? It's not always your fault. You're conditioned on that. You're conditioned that way from everything from the education system to media, even the music that they sprinkle on you sprinkles nothing but mediocrity. I go on shows like The Breakfast Club all the time, and I end up picking fights with rappers a lot, not because I want to fight with them. I'm friends with a lot of them, but there are a lot of them who think I'm a hater because I say, why in the hell, as a black man, would you go telling other black men to stay high and drunk all the time, to disrespect women, to go slinging your penis at anything that moves, to go kill each other, shoot each other in the head, to go throw all your money away, give all your money away to white people so they can get rich and your community stays broke? Why would you do that? What kind of person, who's paying you to go out and make yourself look like an asshole to the world and training our little boys to behave this way? What's wrong with you? You are an enemy of black people. You are not my friend. I'm not going to support you just because you're black. Because there's nothing that you can point to me in your lyrics where you can argue to me in an articulate way that this actually helps the people that you and I supposedly care about. You come from the hood. You've seen poverty. You've seen death. You've seen chaos. You've seen the effects of incarceration and drug addiction. Why do you spread that gospel to the world? Why do you want other people to embrace in this kind of behavior? That doesn't make any sense. So a lot of times, a lot of what we're trained to think about ourselves as black people is absolutely sick. It breeds this weird kind of mental illness. That should absolutely be something that really, really concerns all of us at a fundamental level. In fact, if you really think about it, I was reading a book called Men of Mark, and they were talking about these black men who started Simmons College of Kentucky and HBCU in Kentucky. And they were former men and women. They were former slaves. And one of the things that they talked about was black excellence. And they said, what other group of people do you know could go through what we've gone through and within just 4 or 5 years be sitting next to kings and queens, doctors, lawyers, and presidents? Like, what other group of people can do that other than us, right? So what they were saying back in 1885 was that blackness is excellence, and you should embrace that. But you think about it, where in your life, where do you learn as a black person going through the education system, the economic system, et cetera, where do you learn black excellence? Do you learn it when you go to public school and that teacher from the suburbs is treating the black boys like they're little future convicts of America? No, you don't learn it there. Do you learn it in media? No, you don't. You don't see many black images that really represent true excellence and independence, right? Maybe the closest thing you might get is that great movie, Hidden Figures. That might be an example of excellence. But even that film has some challenges, right? Even that film sort of talked about black excellence, predicated through this lens of whiteness that says that white acceptance is somehow a validation of your excellence. That if you're not accepted by white America, that somehow you're still inferior, you're still mediocre. That your job as a black person is to bang down the door and beg white folks to let you in, when really you were good enough before they let you in. Why do you feel like they have to let you in before you are actually a quality human being? No, you were something before you were born. You were something on the day that you came out of your mother's womb. So I want you to make sure you understand that. Next, number 2. The second thing I believe Dr. King will want you to know is to know who you are and be proud of that person. Don't be ashamed of that. Don't be ashamed of that person. One thing about Dr. King that was really fascinating to me was that I wasn't nearly as impressed with Martin Luther King Jr. as I was with Martin Luther King Sr. and his mother. When I read about the family, because remember, we all come from something. We all are apples that come from a tree. And so when I want to understand the apple, I go look at the tree. So I looked at his family, and I saw the sacrifices. First thing that stood out was the sacrifice the family made for the community. I don't know if most people don't know this. How many of you know that Dr. King's brother died mysteriously a year after he died? How many of y'all know that? Yeah, right in Louisville, Kentucky, the birthplace of Muhammad Ali. That's where I was born. He died mysteriously. He drowned even though he was a good swimmer. So y'all make of that what you want. How many of y'all know that his mother was killed at church? Right? So his family made huge sacrifices for what they believed in, huge sacrifices. The other thing about Dr. King is when I looked at his father, and I looked at Martin Luther King Sr., and I remember a story. Dr. King was about maybe 11 years old, and he and his father were out, and this police officer pulled him over, and he said, "Boy, what are you doing out this late?" And his father said, "That right there," he pointed to Martin, he said, "That's a boy." He said, "I'm a man." He said, "And until you address me as a man, I'm not going to answer any of your questions." Now, just know that could have gotten him killed. That might get you killed today, let alone in 1940, 1950 something, right? But he saw in his parents this dignity that went above and beyond his educational achievements and all this other stuff. He saw in his parents a capacity for giving and for caring about other people. That again meant so much more than him getting a doctorate and making a little bit of money and winning the Nobel Prize. Most people that I know who get a lot of letters behind their name, and think about this, you got a lot of people out here that got PhDs and JDs and MBAs and MSs and MAs and all these other letters behind their name that make them feel like they're better than other people, and they don't do anything for anybody other than themselves. You know, they have no interest whatsoever in taking care of anybody who didn't make it. It's like, I got mine, you get yours, I wish you the best of luck. And then what they do is they follow what I call the Negro blueprint for artificial success. The Negro blueprint for artificial success is work hard, go to school so you can get a good job, so you can go move out in the suburbs and save up some money and you could do well for yourself. Get a nice job, maybe at University of Tennessee somewhere, and where you're surrounded by a lot of people who aren't like you, and that's success. And that's nice. I mean, it's good. I'm happy for you, and I've done that myself. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong if that's the way you've been trained to think, but that's not real success. Success is when you take what you've done and you bring it back to your community. You bring it back home. You show respect to the people that you care about. You don't try to leave the hood to get away from black people. You come back to the hood and you make the hood a better place to live. You reconnect with other people. You create institutions that allow you to share what you've learned with other people and to do business with other people similar to yourself so that you can actually build a strong community so that you don't have to commit what Dr. Claude Anderson describes as one of the greatest crimes of all time, which is when you have to, as a black person, send your child across town to people who hate him to beg for a job. That's one of the biggest crimes. That's a crime. It should be criminal. Because I'm going to tell you this, there's a lot of people I know who are successful, who went to school and got all the credentials and are making plenty of money, who are absolutely miserable, who are stressed out, so stressed out that they drink every weekend, they think about committing suicide, they die early from heart disease and other things because of the stress of going to work every day in a hostile environment around people that don't like them, who don't give them the job, don't pay them what they deserve, won't give them the promotion they deserve, all of that. All of that. In fact, look at your university. I want you to one day go and don't take my word for it. I want you to go and do a survey and figure out how many African-American professors there are on this campus. How many of you have had more than 2 black professors in the 4 years you've been at this school? Now, remember, mind you, in college, you have about was it 40? It was about 40 classes, 3 hours. Was it how many professors would you have in a college career? What, about 30, 40, something like that? So let's say you have 40 professors. How many of you have had more than 2 that are African-American? Raise your hand. How many of you have more than 3? Right. How many of you have had none? How many of you have 1 or less? Raise your hand again if you had none. So none and 1 or less. No, keep your hand up, bro. You keep putting your hand down. You said 0. That means 1 or less. Okay. So here's I'm messing with you, man. I'm messing with you. So think about that. Think about how sick that is. How crazy that is. I mean, do you really think that there aren't black professors that are applying to get jobs at the University of Tennessee? There are hundreds that apply every year. They just pretend to y'all that they're not qualified. They pretty much make you think that, again, be it feeding into white supremacy, they make you really believe that there's this job that's been held by hundreds of white men, that there's not a Negro on earth qualified to do their job. Like, go test me. Test it out. Don't believe me. Go ask them on Monday. Go to the administration and say, hey, we'd like to know why you don't have many African-American professors, and we counted 25 departments where they haven't promoted a black man in 40 years or a black woman in 40 years. We'd like to know why that is. And what they're going to say is they're going to say, well, you know, we're looking all over. We're trying our best to find qualified people for the position. We just can't find anybody, or we can't recruit them here. We can't keep them. That's what they're going to say, and that's a fucking lie. Excuse my French. That is a lie. That ain't true. That people are applying for jobs here every day, and you deserve to have professors who look like you. I mean, think about it. White students get to come to school. They get to see all kinds of professors where they see themselves in front of the classroom. Why don't you deserve that same right? You do. And I didn't mean to cuss. I apologize, but I'm sorry. I'm not going to hold that back. That's nonsense. So what I'm saying to you is this. Look, on the other side of that wall of so-called success, a lot of times we somehow misconstrue success to be the same as assimilation or acceptance by people who don't like us. And black people are kind of the only group of people who've really been conditioned to believe that you should go back to the very same groups of people, the very same institutions that disrespected your ancestors, and beg them to feed your children, beg them for the opportunity to feed your kids. Because I'm going to tell you like this, you can't fight white supremacy when you're begging people to pay your bills at the same time. You can't fight somebody who's feeding your kids. You can't bite the hand that feeds you, because their hand, it will stop feeding you, it will slap you. So the first thing you got to understand is this. If you are a person of color or any person in this room who wants to be independent, learn how to start your own business. Learn how to have a plan B. Learn how to have a side hustle. If I had not learned how to start a business, I'd be so frustrated right now with my life. It's ridiculous. And I would literally hate my life. Let's move on. The next thing I think Dr. King would say is work with everyone, but work for no one. Work with everyone, but work for no one. And the reason I bring that up is because when I think about Dr. King's life, I think about the present, and I think about how, has anybody ever seen the social media recently where a lot of people are taking heat, a lot of black people are taking heat for going to meet with President Trump? Like Steve Harvey went and somebody else went and whatever. Not that I don't even like Steve Harvey. I think he's an idiot. But Steve Harvey went to meet with Trump and some other people did. And people were like, oh, you're a sellout because you're talking to Trump, blah, 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 blah. And people asked me about it. They said, well, what do you think about these celebrities meeting with Trump? I said, well, I mean, since it's King's birthday, let's talk about Dr. King. I said, I think Dr. King would meet with Trump. Dr. King met with every single president that was in office the whole time he was alive, the whole time he had a power. Every time he got invited to the White House, whether it was Eisenhower or Kennedy or whomever it was, Johnson, he met with all of them. And the reason that I think he would have met with every other president, I think he would have met with Nixon and Ford and Carter and Reagan and Bush and Clinton and Bush and Obama and Trump. I think he would have met with everybody because he knew that those people were not his employers, right? He knew that he was there to advocate on behalf of the people that he represented. And the problem you have, and this is what, this is one of those things I've said that's got me in trouble because it's in contrast to what people are saying, is that even during the Obama presidency, you had people meeting with President Obama who weren't doing anything for black people. They were Obama's employee. You know, Al Sharpton was one of them, for example. Al Sharpton went to meet with Obama about 45 times. And every time, he pretty much took orders from the White House to convince black people to buy into things that were not in their best interest. And so I became the spoilsport a little bit on this because I was like, well, why are you trying to get black people to support that? That's bullshit. That's wrong. That's not right. Like that's not in the interest of black people. I live in Chicago. We had almost 800 people murdered this year. Like that's high on the priority list. This other stuff, I don't know who this is for, but this ain't for people of color. So stop doing that. But the reason they do that is because they live under the presumption that black people are politically unsophisticated. So they feed people imagery as opposed to actual substantive policy. And it's hard to make that critique without people getting emotional about it and saying, oh, you must not like our president. No, I live 2 blocks from Obama. I endorsed Obama before black people did. If I were to see him, I would want him to do well. I like him. But one thing you must understand about politics is there's a difference between somebody liking you and somebody respecting you. So what does that mean? That means that when Obama or Trump or anybody sitting in office, they're looking to you to bring your issues to the table. They're not looking to do things for you just because you're cool and your buddies. If they can get away with getting something from you and giving you nothing back, then they will do that every time because they're going to wonder, like, why aren't you actually fighting for anything? You're showing up to the job and you keep volunteering. It's like, think about it. Imagine if you're a boss and you're an employee and you run a company and you're planning on paying somebody $50,000 a year to work, but they come in and they insist on volunteering and working for free. And you're trying to make a profit, so you're going to go, well, okay, well, yeah, sure, come on in, right? You're going to let them work for free because they didn't come in and negotiate a salary. They didn't ask for anything. Well, for black people, when it comes to our political loyalty, we give it away easy, we give it away cheap, and politicians know that. They know that we can be scared into supporting whatever they put in front of us as long as they tell us that the Republicans are the boogeyman. Now, I'm not a Republican. I don't support the Republicans. But when I listen, when any politician calls me, no matter what party affiliation you have, I want to know, what are you going to do for black people? If your idea makes sense, maybe I'll support it. If it doesn't make sense, I'm not going to support it. This has nothing to do with you being a Democrat or a Republican. So let's get, sort of away from all of that. I would argue that getting into the whole political, or the liberal conservative divide doesn't benefit black people at all. You don't want to be overly committed to anything. Next. The next thing that Dr. King did that I really loved was he understood the importance of understanding what success means as a black person. That success really doesn't mean a whole lot if you're not making a whole lot of other people successful. One of the things that I figured out was that when you go out and you make a lot of money and you become wealthy and you become powerful and all these other things, there's a difference between being a successful and powerful person and being somebody that truly leaves a lasting impact on the world. If you really want to have your key to immortality, then institutionalize yourself. Because here's the thing. You might go out and get the nice job, and you might work there 30 years and make a whole lot of money and have an important position, all these titles that make you feel validated, make you call your mama and say, Mama, I made it, which is fine. Everybody does that. But you could give your whole life to that corporation, and then the day that you die, they're going to replace you within a week, and they're going to pretend like you were never there. There are people who work their whole lives, and all they do is they work for themselves, and when they're done, it's almost as if they never existed. And one of the things I always remember was a law of physics. There's a law of physics, it's very basic, and it says that force equals mass times acceleration. Force equals mass times acceleration. Now, what does that mean? That means that if I want to have a lot of force, like if I'm trying to go through that wall and I'm an elephant, I got to accelerate, and you take a big, massive elephant and you accelerate him toward the wall. He's going to go through the wall because he's got force and he's got mass and he's got acceleration, right? Well, there are a lot of people, I know a lot of black people, I know a lot of famous people, a lot of wealthy people who have a lot of mass. The mass is your wealth and your power and all the things that make you feel like you are somebody. But they have no impact on the world because they're scared to accelerate. They're scared to take on a challenge. They're scared to be controversial. They're scared to speak up on an issue. They're scared to stand up for what they believe in. And what you do when you do that, when you're always living based on fear, when every decision is made based on self-preservation, is you are completely annihilating your ability to have any meaningful impact on the world. And so at the end of the day, we don't need more educated black people. We don't need more wealthy black people. We need wealthy, educated black people who care about other black people. Wealthy, educated black people who believe in something. Wealthy, educated black people who love themselves enough to say, you know what, I don't really care if you don't like me. I'm going to do what's right. Because if you want to make change, you have to have force. You have to have an impact. And the only way you can have an impact is if you accelerate. So if you're looking at this campus, for example, if you right now, I'm gonna tell you this: students control everything on a college campus. You're just trained to believe that you don't have any power because they don't want you to know you have power. But students control everything, and so if students have enough acceleration and enough force, then you could change this campus in such a way that you'll see it'll be a different campus 10, 20, 30 years from now. But if you don't do anything, if you're afraid to accelerate or you're too distracted to accelerate, then what's going to happen is your kids are going to come to this school 20 years from now, and you're going to say, my God, this school is exactly the way it was when I graduated 20 years ago. And that's what I had to go through. My goddaughter goes to the University of Kentucky, my alma mater. And we had some student protests. We had some things that we did on campus. And I could point to some things that we changed that affected her life today. But I could think of a lot of things that we didn't address, things that they lied to us about, like, for example, the black faculty issue that hadn't changed. I said, my God, you have fewer black professors than we had when I was there in 1993. So you got to ask yourself, do you want the world to know that you were here? Or do you just want to be another person who simply got by day to day as you were slowly just waiting to die? You don't want to live a life like that, in my opinion. Dr. King didn't live a life like that. The last thing that Dr. King would teach, in my opinion, if he were here, this is another thing he would say, is he would tell you to build wealth by any means necessary. And I deliberately use Malcolm's words when I say that, because at the end of Dr. King's life, this is what got him killed. See, Dr. King wasn't so much of a threat when he talked about just political issues and civil rights issues. But when he started talking about the money, that's when they killed his ass. That's when Dr. King died. That's when they went to murder him. Because when you talk about wealth distribution in America, when you talk about black people getting real economic power, then you're talking about real power. You're talking about the ability to truly do whatever you want to do. And it's true. I was talking to students earlier, and I said, remember that song by Kanye West? Just wait till I get my money right. You know that song, right? Ain't gonna tell me nothing. Well, that's true on an individual level, and it's true on an aggregate level. A lot of the reason that black people are afraid to speak up is because they got white people paying their bills, right? And when you understand economic systems, when you understand where the money is and how to get it, you then gain a type of power and a type of freedom that is almost indescribable. And that's not a type of freedom that's taught to you. Most of you, when you go to college, you're not taught to control anything. You're taught to go work for somebody. How many of you feel that you've been trained to go out and get a job? Most of you have been trained to go out and get a job. How many of you have been trained to go create a job? A few of you, right? A few of you, exactly. So what's interesting is that if you hear the rhetoric that I often hear from the people that I kind of hang out with, you hear rhetoric that will say, look, I just need somebody to give me an opportunity. If they'll just give me an opportunity, I can do it. Well, where do opportunities come from? Opportunities aren't something that's just given. Opportunities have to be created somewhere, right? That's like me saying, I can't wait to eat. I just need somebody to cook me some food. I need somebody to cook me a meal. And if they don't cook for me, I'm going to starve to death. Well, food comes from somewhere. Somebody had to go hunt that food down. Somebody had to go grow that food. Somebody then had to cook that food. So why are you spending your time trying to find a restaurant when you can go learn how to grow food and cook? We're not trained to do that. So one of my fundamental beliefs is that every black person in America needs to learn how to start their own business as a pathway to true liberation. Because you will never have any type of liberation in America as long as you're dependent upon white supremacy to pay your bills. I understand capitalism very, very well. I understand white supremacy very, very well. They go hand in hand. They're deeply connected. One thing about capitalism is capitalism has no heart. Capitalism is not interested in doing the right thing. The reason slavery lasted for 250 years instead of 50 years is because of capitalism. Capitalism ain't trying to hurt you and ain't trying to help you. It's trying to make money. And so one of the things I can say about America is a country that's run by money. If you want to know why you have a guy in the White House who appears to be a little bit of an asshole, who doesn't seem to care about what anybody thinks, it's because capitalism gave him the power to kind of do whatever he wants. And I'll tell you this too. When I look at Donald Trump's children, I think about this. When I teach black people, we have something called the Black Business School online. We have about 30,000 students. It's like our own little HBCU. I tell them, I say, stop getting mad about Donald Trump for a minute. Stop worrying. That's stupid. Throw all that away. Doesn't matter. Study how other people got power over you. Why are you not going to be able to take him out of that spot he's in? Look at the way he's raising his children. He's got his children in his family business. He's got his son. His son's name is Barron. Barron, names mean a lot. Names mean everything. He named his son Barron because he's telling him subtly and not so subtly, you're royalty. You're going to start playing this game at the top. So when Barron is sitting with his daddy Donald, and he's talking about Dad, how am I going to go make some money one day? I guarantee you this, Donald ain't telling Barron, oh, you need to go out and go to school and get a job. He ain't telling him that. He's telling him, well, here's how you run a company, son. Here's how you make an investment, son. Here's how you manage your portfolio. Here's how you own real estate, son. Here's how you make business deals, son. He's training his son to play the game from the top, whereas we train our kids to play the game at the bottom. The first time I asked about money, I was told to go get a job. And then I was told that, but you got to be nice to those folks. I know they mean to you. I know racism's hard, but you gotta put up with it. You got to deal with it. So I was being taught, instead of overcoming the dysfunctional environment and getting away from it, I was taught to cope with the dysfunction. And that's what we teach so many of our children. It's not your fault. It's because for hundreds of years you were raised that way. You were taught that way 200-300 years ago. So why would that change unless we decide to change it? So not only should every black person in America learn how to start a business, every black family should have a family business. That means that when you get together with your relatives for Sunday dinner, you don't just talk about sports or talk about silly stuff. You talk about the family business. You talk about ways you can come together to help each other pay the bills. The best experience of my life has been the ability to work with my children every day, to work with people I love every day, to be able to talk to my relatives that are struggling financially and offer them a job. When my daughter called me and told me that the job that she had at the time was when they were mistreating her and they were racist, like a lot of jobs are, I didn't say, well, baby, I know it's hard, but you just got to deal with it. I said, well, you know what? Screw those people. You quit that job. You come work with your dad. You're going to be all right with me. I'm going to protect you, because that's what a father is supposed to do. That's what a parent is supposed to do. So one day your children are going to go through the same struggle you're going through. And you got to ask yourself, do I want them to go through hell, or do I want them to have a safe haven? Every community has a safe haven except black people. Everybody takes care of themselves except black people. You don't believe me? Go to Chinatown, or go to a city that has a Chinatown. I want you to set up the best restaurant imaginable, charge the lowest prices, and offer the best food. And I want you to see how quick you go out of business. They will not support you. They will not give you their money because they know that protecting their wealth is a means for their survival. Black people are the only ones who are trained to give our money away to everybody and then go brag about it. And that's one of the reasons we remain powerless. But a lot of people think that black people are economically powerless because we don't have any money to sort of accumulate, and that's just not true. Actually, black people, the 1.1 trillion in spending power that we have exceeds the gross domestic product of about 80% of the countries on this earth. I can name a list of countries: Venezuela, Iran, Mexico, Sweden, Saudi Arabia. Black people have more spending power than the GDP of all those countries, and then I can name another 100 countries on top of that. So we've got the money. We've got everything we need. We just don't have the mindset to build. So if you want to know what got Dr. King killed, it was the fact that he started actually realizing, he started saying things like, I fear that I've integrated my people into a burning house. He said, wait a minute, maybe integration isn't helping black people as much as I thought. And you look at it 50 years later, black institutions have fallen apart. We have far more black businesses then than we do now. We had, I think it was over 50 black insurance companies across the country. We don't have those anymore. Name a black insurance company. We don't have those anymore. Black banks, we have black banks everywhere. We had institutions. The Negro Leagues had the best baseball players on earth. But for some reason, we thought, again, our self-esteem problem, which was created through slavery, from hundreds of years being taught that you're subordinate, we thought that being next to white people made us better. And it doesn't make you better. You don't hear white people getting together and saying, how are we going to get an HBCU to let one of us in? They don't have that conversation. They don't sort of look at Howard University and say, yeah, I got into Harvard, but I really want to go to Howard because that's when I know I really made it. But you do that all the time with your institutions because you don't want to be near your own people because you're taught that blackness is inferiority, and that's simply not true. Now, if anybody's offended by this, I apologize. I can only tell the truth. But I want you to understand, loving black people doesn't mean I hate anybody. It just means I'm going to love myself. And sometimes me loving myself means I got to love with ferocity, which means sometimes I might have to fight you. Because remember, white supremacy is kind of a two-step tango. It's a two-person dance. Right? It's not just something that white people do or are committed to. It's something that black people are committed to. If you're not committed to it, then it doesn't work. So there are a lot of black white supremacists that are out here in this country. Now, I'm going to stop talking because I want to do some Q&A here. I don't know how much time we have for the Q&A. How much time do we have, sister? Does anybody know?
15 minutes.
Okay, that's perfect. 15 minutes for Q&A, and you could tell me how wrong I was and how much I made you mad and how full of crap I am. So please, raise your hand if you have a question or comment. Yes, sir.
So you kind of touched on one of my questions already, but what are some of the important economic steps to take to survive a Trump presidency specifically, and what are some of the important economic steps to take to disintegrate from white supremacist society?
Okay, here's the thing. A lot of people think that when I talk about black people building our own economic systems that I'm talking about some type of separatism. And I'm not really talking about separatism because we live in a global economy. You're going to do business with everybody. It's about collapsing into your core and having your core strength so you can properly integrate with other people. Integration in itself is not a bad idea. It just was executed in the wrong way in the United States. Your self-esteem as black people is too low. White people hated us too much. And so when you're integrating with someone who's been trained for hundreds of years to dislike you, it's not going to be a fair shake. It becomes like an abusive marriage. So like if you ask somebody, is marriage good or bad? Well, it depends on what kind of marriage they were in, right? Marriage can be wonderful or it can be a nightmare depending on what kind of marriage you're in. You integrated into an abusive marriage because you had low self-esteem and you had nowhere to go. Imagine a woman marrying a man and her self-esteem's low, he's an abusive jerk, and she doesn't even have a family support base to go to when times get tough. It's going to be a horrible experience for her. So that's what you didn't have. You didn't have a place to go when things got too tough. in the environment that you're in. So steps that we have to take is, first and foremost, just an awareness of these systems. I think that really understanding all the things that are in place. You see, the brainwashing process is so deep and insidious that you don't even know what's happening. It starts at birth. It starts from just the very basic idea that you think it makes sense to hand your children's brains over to these disruptive and destructive educational systems at an early age. You don't understand. This was a strategy. When they pretty much annihilated the Native Americans, one of the things that they instituted in order to control them was they said, we want to get their children. The adults, the parents are harder to fight, but if we get their kids, we can control them. So they would take the little Native American kids out of the village, take them away to the school where they would punish them for wearing any sort of tribal dress. If you got caught practicing any of your traditional ceremonies, you got punished for that. And you got rewarded for assimilation. You got rewarded for dressing white, speaking white, behaving white. And then they put a little money in your pocket, send you back to the village, so you become a role model for the other children, so they will want to be like you. So that's what they pretty much do to you. You just don't even know it's there. You're like the animal that was born in a zoo, so he doesn't even know that he was born in a cage. And he thinks that the zookeeper is his friend because the zookeeper is the one who brings the food by and feeds him every day, because he's never known what it's like to be free. And once he learns to be free, I don't care what animal you're talking about. If you give that animal a taste of freedom, you can't put him back in that cage no more. He'd rather die than go back in that cage. So most of you, if you ever really get a taste of what it means to be free, where it means to not have a boss, not take orders, do what you want in your life and say what you want and not be fearful of the consequences, you can't go back the other way. So I would say understand the systems. Educational system, I personally believe it's possible for the majority of black people to educate our own children. A lot of other communities do it. We can do it too. I also believe that every child should know by the age of 12 how to start their own business. I think that learning how to start a business is more important than anything you'll learn on this campus, in my opinion. I can tell you this. I have more education than 99% of the people I know. I was in school till I was 31 years old, but there was nothing I learned on my way to my doctorate that was more valuable than when I took the time to learn how to start a business. Because when the heat got hot, when I started becoming outspoken and I would go on CNN and say some things that made my colleagues uncomfortable, I was able to give them the finger and go and build my own thing. And I was very happy that way. I felt very, very free. I was able to create my own job. I knew I wouldn't fire myself. And it allowed me to sort of feel an experience that I just can't describe to you in words. Yes, ma'am.
Hey, so I'm referring to your speech when you were basically saying that Al Sharpton was like a political figurehead to convince black people that Barack Obama was doing something for us. So my question for you is, do you think that Barack Obama was more of a democratic president instead of a president for black people? And should we get mad that he didn't do that much?
Well, I'm not going to tell you whether you should be mad or not. That's your decision. I will say that, again, it's me being totally honest. I get darts thrown in my head for being overly objective about it. Because I don't dislike him. I kid you. I swear I don't. But he was an amazing president for this country. He was so good. His approval rating was very, very high for good reason. He handled himself very, very well under pressure. And as a representative, as a symbolic figure, he was tremendous for the world. No question about that. But what you can't make the mistake of doing is translating all of that into meaningful, relevant, substantive policies to deal with the critical issues that were being faced by black people in this country. And so where my division came with the administration, because they called me a bunch of times. I eventually told them to stop calling me because I thought they were calling because they wanted to hear from different voices. I was like, okay, I got a PhD in finance. I can tell you some things about how to maybe solve some economic problems, or you could talk to people like Claude Anderson. He could tell you how to help with the black unemployment crisis. But they didn't want to hear that. It was a one-way conversation. They talked at me as opposed to talking to me. So there, I said, okay, I think what you're doing now is you're lobbying me, and the problem that I have is I have a big bullshit repellent in my brain that makes me incapable of allowing you to insult my intelligence and play with my head. It just doesn't work. I get furious when people play with my mind. I'm not the smartest person in the world, but I'm not stupid. And so long story short, I think that with the Obama presidency, part of our political maturity can get to the point where we just see it for what it was. The babies, Sasha and Malia, the cutest things ever. Michelle was the bomb. Barack, smooth guy, very smart, great president for America, and he wasn't the president of black people. A lot of people have said that, and that's absolutely true. But one thing that's also true, though, in politics is that we put him in office. I mean, our extraordinary output in the voting booth is what got him there. So there's a political quid pro quo that's supposed to take place where you take care of the people that took care of you. And so when Hillary's election came around and people asked me, well, what do you think? Are you going to go and fight for Hillary? And I was like, well, no, because I believe in a quid pro quo. I don't really care if she gets elected or not. I hope she does. She seems, Trump's an idiot. We know that. But you didn't do anything for us. If we used to do something for you, you're supposed to give us something. But you're telling me now that you don't have time to take care of us because you got to take care of yourself first. Because that's what people will say. Well, Obama's busy and he's got to worry about the whole world and he's the president of everybody, not just black people. So I say, okay, fine. So when you go to that single mama who's struggling to take care of her kids and you say, well, take off work to go vote. No, she'd like to support you, but she can't. You did what's best for you. She's got to do what's best for her. She's got to take care of her baby. She's got to go find a way to pay her bills because you're not going to do it. You're not going to help her with that. So she's going to take care of herself, and you're going to take care of yourself. We wish you good luck with that. And that was my position. And a lot of people got upset with that. And this is what's so deep about the way the mental game is played. And I want you to kind of try to have an open mind, even if you don't agree with me. Just try to understand this because all I'm doing is trying to tell you the truth. I saw a tremendous amount of very disturbing manipulation of black people that occurred behind the scenes when both Hillary and Barack were running for president. I remember one of my friends is a famous rapper, and he said that he went on a show and they told him specifically that you cannot say the name Bernie Sanders on the air because this station was getting a lot of ad money from the Democratic Party. And they told them that we don't even want black people to know that there's an alternative outside of Hillary Clinton. And that to me is a problem. When you're denying people information, anybody who doesn't want you to have information is not your friend, right? Because you have a right to get all the information and make the decision that's best for you. So that kind of manipulation was very problematic for me. So I don't think it's a matter of telling anybody to dislike somebody or what to do. But, I know that when people were asking me, well, what are you going to do in the election? I said, well, I vote for candidates that I feel are going to make the lives of myself and the people I care about better. And right now, neither candidate really does that. So I'm not going to vote for Democrats or Republicans. And they say, well, why are you telling black people not to vote? And I said, no, I'm not telling black people not to vote. I'm telling them what I'm going to do because it's my right as an American to do what I want. But your ancestors died for you to have the right to vote. No, my ancestors didn't die for me. They died for me to have the right to vote, not the obligation to vote for people that I don't support. And if you want a reference, go read W.E.B. Du Bois. He said the same thing 80 years ago. He wrote an article called Why I Will Not Vote. And he wasn't a stupid man, right? But the thing is that they're so used to black people sort of being cheap and easy that they became very frustrated with the idea of simply telling black people to think for themselves. And that's all I tell people. I'm not telling you to agree with me. I'm telling you to get the information and think for yourself. Yes, sir.
How do we build the black school HBCUs in our black communities?
How do we build the HBCUs? Well, if you support the HBCUs, I think that's important. Absolutely. I think there are other ways, though, to support as well. I think that there are institutions in the community, even outside of HBCUs, that are worthy of supporting. What I found was a good way to kind of give back is joining organizations that really sort of lean toward independent thought and independent economic activity and independent education for black people. So, for example, one of the things that we have every year, we have the All Black National Convention where we just bring together black people who want to express themselves freely. We don't allow any corporate sponsorship. We don't care if you're Democrat, Republican, or anything in between. That doesn't matter. We don't believe blackness should be constrained or beholden to any group, any political party or anything. And so that's one of the things that we have in place that people have joined. But there are other things out there. I think that understanding the importance of supporting the things you believe in economically matters. A lot of black organizations can't really do right on behalf of black people because they're beholden to all these people that give them money. The NAACP, for example, is pretty much bought out. Because they take money from anybody who will offer it. And these companies, they don't give you money. Nobody's ever going to give you money and expect nothing in return, right? If it's a lot of money, especially if it's a company or something, so you got to be real cautious about who you take money from because you got to ask yourself, is this a person or a group I want to be in partnership with? And that's not something we're really taught. We're kind of taught to just take money from wherever it comes from, and that doesn't make any sense. But also at the same time, we have to step up and support. I think buying black is really important. When you support a business, understand that you're the lifeblood of black businesses. A lot of people are asking me, they say, well, why would you tell black people to boycott businesses that aren't black. And I say, well, actually, other people have been boycotting us for 400 years. I mean, you don't see other people in droves going to support black businesses. But so without black people, black businesses have nothing, right? So when you're going to buy something, I think it should be a conscious effort to say, you know, I really want to buy black so I can support a black family so that money will stay in my community. Everybody else already does this. What I'm saying is not radical, revolutionary, or genius. Asian community does this very well. The Arab community does this. Even white people kind of do this with each other. I mean, Eurocentric mindset is global. It's very, very, very powerful. So at the end of the day, you got to look out for yourself first. I mean, I think that's just common sense. Yes, sir.
So what are some effective ways to like link up with people that have the opposite of what you have? So say you have an idea to start a business, but you don't have the capital, or you have the capital, but you're not the kind of person that can just think of an idea. So is it like a resource or like a website or like any effective way to get the other half of what you need to get a business? Or
Well, you know, I would start that journey not as one where you're thinking that you have to solve the world's problems like quickly. I would start it in terms of creating relationships. It's like, you know, like if you want to interact find a wife and you want to go meet some girls or something like that, you don't want to just walk up and say, hey, will you marry me tomorrow, right? But you'll say like, maybe I'll go hang out in the library, some other places and go meet some nice ladies and just become friends and see what happens at that point. I think that that's what you should do. Think about, you know, entrepreneurship as more of a social endeavor than just a pure business endeavor, right? Most people tend to do business with people that they like, that they have something in common with, that they can relate to. That's one of the reasons why black unemployment is higher than every other group of people, because the institutions that are run by other people, predominantly white males, let's say, some of them aren't trying to be racist. They just hire who they identify with. They hire their friends. They hire their relatives. The same thing you would do. So it's not as if there's some insidious plot all the time to keep you out. It's that they built this institution for them. Imagine if you and your homeboys got together and built a company together, you know, and somebody came in and said, well, you're excluding people who are not in your inner circle. You'd probably give them the finger. You'd be like, well, I mean, this is my business. I'm going to run it the way I want to run it. So a lot of people have that same mindset, and it doesn't always make them bad people. What it means is that, in my opinion, that on contrast, we've trained ourselves, or we've been trained to be uncompetitive people. So we don't understand that global economics is competition. It's all built on almost like gang warfare. People form cliques and coalitions where they support each other. Like the Asian Pacific Partnerships is where all the Asian countries come together and say, let's band together economically so we can take care of each other. The European Union is a big gang where all the European countries say, let's band together. The Americas, NAFTA, they said, let's form a gang where we can take care of each other. Well, black people just need our own gang. We need to become gang affiliated. So what I would encourage you to do is maybe after this is over, get gang affiliated. Get together with at least 10, let's say 8 to 10 people, and say, let's form a black entrepreneur society. And don't set an agenda yet. Just the only agenda you should set, in my opinion, is we're going to meet once a week, and we're going to just start talking about business. I got videos online. You can watch some of those if you want. There are books you can read together, conversations you can have. And what's going to happen is a beautiful process where nature is going to take its course, where you're going to come together and you're going to start sharing ideas and you're going to, you're going to start just sort of figuring things out. And then you're going to start doing business together. Next thing you know, some money is going to start coming out. And then it's going to become a little bit more and a little bit more. And then 10 years down the line, you'll be looking back on that as the beginning of something that allows you to eventually feed your children and becomes a family dynasty that you can pass on to your kids. So that's where I would start. Just start with the basics. Don't put the weight of the world on your shoulders. Yes, sir.
So I'm gonna just throw myself out there. Before I begin, I just want to say I truly agree with everything you stated tonight. And I think it was awesome, and I feel like it takes an open mind to see what you see in a certain limelight. Now, my question is how do we change the microwave mentality of young African-American male in low socioeconomic status societies? And I say that because I come from the same background like you. I'm an only child. My mom had me at 16. She dropped out of high school. I go to the same high school she goes to. I graduate, top of my class, number one. Then I don't have a black mentor in sight. So all my mentors throughout my entire life has been Caucasian. And so you have this Caucasian mentor who invests in you, who sends you overseas to different countries, They want to send you to these private schools. They had this path for you to travel, to quote unquote be just like them. So then you find yourself getting comfortable with adapting to this identity gap of, oh, if I do this, if I take this route, then like you stated, I feel accepted or I feel subdued to do what they do, and I feel okay by myself, and I've reached what they call the status quo or success. Somehow along that line, I didn't allow myself to get brainwashed, but what I knew is that my background didn't have the resources that this background has. So what I do, I pull from this resource to go back and pour the same resources that I'm getting from them into my community. But here's where I fall short, is that the resources I'm grabbing hold to pull into my community, they're not reciprocating, or they're not receiving it well. So you have this thing called the Uncle Tom or the Coon. When you're not trying to be that, you're trying to show them what you were shown. But it's that because it came from someone different than you, then it's not accepted. However, we don't have resources, we don't have materials, we don't have anything to hold on or grab to. So how do we change that mentality to where they understand that it's not that you think that you're better than them because you left the hood, you go to college, you go to this UT Knox, the top institution in the state of Tennessee. You're doing good, you maintain your Hope Scholarship or whatever scholarship you see for being black. You're still on the dean's list, you're doing all these great things. So now you're not perceived as my people. Now you perceive as indifferent or we're not alike because you're educated.
Okay.
So how do we tap into that microwave mentality of changing that? Because I've always wondered why I've never had a black mentor at site. Or all my mentors throughout my 20 years of living have been Caucasian.
Okay.
And I've received those teachers well, I've received what they've given me well, and I've took that into consideration as maybe I can use these materials to build my will.
Right. Okay. Let me jump in and answer the question. Okay. I see you got a lot to say. You almost answered your own question, but let me jump in and say this. First and foremost, I don't think you should be ashamed at all of the spaces you go into. I know you're not, but I want to reiterate that. Don't be ashamed at all of any space you go into, who you work with, who you learn from, etc. In fact, one of my favorite books I mentioned earlier, Black Labor, White Wealth, Dr. Claude Anderson says very clearly that the best way to understand how to empower yourself as a black person is to understand how other people use their power to disempower you, how they gain power, right? And so I think it's perfectly fine to do that. And this whole thing about Uncle Tom and all of that's stupid. I used to get that too. People think you talk a certain way, you must be Uncle Tom. That's dumb. If you love black people, then you're not an Uncle Tom. I don't care what you sound like. Now, here's the thing, though. What you got to understand is that you must be very careful. And I know you mentioned your 20 years of living, and so I had 45. So since I was 20, my perspective shifted a little bit. You have to be careful about how you talk about your community. And when you talk about wealth and resources, for example, one of the biggest mistakes we make when we discuss wealth and resources is we think wealth has all to do with money and things like that. Well, if you think that wealth is consumed mostly with money, then you're going to always lose to white supremacy because white people control all the money, right? So if you think that if I think money makes me a better person and makes you a better person, and white folks have all the money, then why wouldn't I want to be just like them? Why wouldn't I want to be next to them? Because they have everything that I think is valuable, everything that I think makes me human, right? And one thing I've learned about wealth, and I've just studied it, that's what I do with my PhDs in finance, is that only the minority of wealth actually is actually consumed with money, right? The majority of wealth is non-financial. Okay, so that's the first thing you want to try to practice, sort of meditating on that a little bit. The other thing too is that you don't want to get in the habit of thinking of your community as people that have nothing to give. They have no resources. We've got a lot. Little things like free time, intelligence, energy, your youth. Those are all infinitely valuable assets. If you don't believe me, let me ask you this question. I'm 45. How old are you, man? 21. Okay. I want to put you in a time machine, and I'm going to get in the machine next to it. And when we come out, I'm going to be 21. You're going to be 45. If I give you $1 million, would you do that? Okay, so it's just a money. It's a money thing. It's a money thing. All right, how about $5 million? Would you give up the next 24 years of your life for $5 million?
Time is more valuable than money to me.
Exactly, right. And I bet you if I offered him $10 million, $20 million, $30 million, he wouldn't say yes. If he has any sense, he would, right? Which he looks like a smart guy, right? And so what has he just communicated to me? He's communicated to me that he has at least one thing in his life that's worth millions of dollars, and that's his youth. You know, your youth, your health, your relationships. Though, you know, all these things have value, so you can't just think that, you know, that the guy that has the most money is the richest man in the room. That's not true. I know a lot of very wealthy people who are really, really poor because they think that all their wealth is consumed by how much money they have. So what I would almost say is that one thing that will help in terms of connecting with people, there's an old saying that says, before you correct, you must connect. So what does that mean? That means that if I'm trying to help you, I can't come in there thinking like I know everything. First thing I'm going to tell you, brothers, my 2 cents is when you're talking to other brothers, do more listening and less talking. Don't, because you did a lot of talking just now, right? Because you like me. I was a straight A student when I was 20. I would just be like, well, we need to do this. We need to change it. And then I realized, wait a minute, I don't know anything. I'm not that smart. I need to do more listening and more connecting. So if I'm talking to a brother that heard me, let's say on the Breakfast Club, who didn't get a high school diploma, who's straight from the hood, who maybe is still banging or whatever, I need to learn from his perspective before I start invoking all my wisdom and trying to imperialize his thinking and make him think that being like me is the pathway to his salvation. Don't ever think that way, right? Because I guarantee you, any animal on this earth, human beings, we're mammals, just like deer and buffalo. There's not an animal on this earth who isn't going to love you if you feed him, if you help him fulfill a need. If you're feeding the animal every day, if he grows up knowing that you're nourishing him and you're helping him fulfill an important need, he's going to learn to love you and give you a type of respect he won't give to anybody else. So when I talk to somebody who doesn't see the world the same way I do, they don't like me because I'm smart and all these other things. They like me because they know I respect them. I don't treat you like I'm better than you. But I do talk to you as if maybe I can help you a little bit. Maybe I can offer you something, right? So just sort of approach it that way. So go learn from everybody that you want to learn from and bring it back home. You're on the right track with that. But always make sure it's from a position of respect. Never sort of, we all do this. You can end up sometimes, if you're not careful, end up looking down on where you came from. You know, and I'm going to tell you, being next to the white man does not make you a better person. It makes you different. It gives you access to a different world. And there's value there. There's a lot of good stuff happening there. But never think being closer to white people makes you better. They don't think that being closer to you makes them better. So just understand that. He's got a lot of he's got a lot of questions. Yes, sir.
So how important are allies when you're in this kind of fight, especially from the dominant society? Because I look at things like the Women's March that happened this past weekend, and while I think that some of those things that they were talking about were important, a lot of those people don't come riot for the black community like they expect us to come riot for them. So like, how should we really use those allies when we're trying to get things popping?
Well, I would say the most important word to remember is a word